as was said, I'm coming from GlobSec, and we are partnering with CSD and other organizations in the Project Shift. We are very happy about it because it builds on a lot of projects that we've already done. But what is very exciting about that, we are going to push this forward a little bit more and beyond of what we were doing before. And we are going to participate also on the what's next. So what we are going to do after we know everything that we found out. And so this is not only about countering falsehoods. We want to find out how we can find the solutions that are audience first, testable, and capable of reaching people outside our bubble. And here I have 4 distinguished speakers that probably are very familiar to you because we are naturally colleagues and we meet in many events. So I will start presenting them, and then I'll give them a floor to have opening statements. So first is Elliot Short. He is a project director at Zinc Network, a communication agency in London focused on social change, media development, and strategic communications. Elliot serves as the project director for the Open Information Partnership, a network dedicated to countering disinformation and tackling state-sponsored narratives in Eastern Europe. Then we have Tom Greenwood at the very end, strategy lead at Logic Media, also very important partner for what's next part of the Shift project. He has led strategy and creative projects for organizations including Apple, UN, BBC, Channel 4, so vast experience, and works on translating private sector media innovation into effective digital responses to disinformation and polarization. So we have on my left side Saman Nazari, a lead researcher at Alliance for Europe and coordinator for CDN. I think I don't have to explain it, but it's a counter-disinformation network. And his work is more on the FIMI side, but we will hear from him today about what we can do and how we can disrupt what is happening. So sort of also kind of like reaction to what we find. And we have Kalin Georgia from Funky Citizens, who is also surprising studying disinformation ecosystems and algorithms and how they reinforce polarization. He specialized in critical discourse analysis and computational linguistics, and of course, like focusing on online conflict narratives. So first, I will give you my fellow presenters' opening statements, and then I will follow up with questions if there will be none from the from the audience. But I hope everybody who works on a topic and has something to share, good or bad practices or questions, that you will be ready to react. So let me start with Elliot from RIP and FIMI response experience. What does it take to move from identifying a threat to designing a response that actors can actually deploy? So how do we design effective responses that we can learn from it for our Shift project? Feel free also to share with us what not to do. Sometimes it saves a lot of time to share that this didn't work at all. So please abstain from it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I mean, with those 2 questions, I could talk for days. So I will be concise as I can now. I appreciate we've got a lot of time on this panel. I'd like to start maybe just by taking a quick moment to reflect. Almost 2 weeks today, 2 weeks from now, will be the 10-year anniversary of when my fellow British citizens voted to leave the European Union. And it's kind of surreal that it's already 10 years. But yeah, being here in Brussels, seeing all of this happening, seeing the Democracy Shield emerge, seeing this project emerge, it's amazing to see. And it's such a shame that the UK is not really part of these mechanisms anymore. But I'm really glad to be kind of here to share what we've been doing. I don't represent the government, but what we've been doing for the government there. So yeah, to your question, I think there's a lot more you need to do, obviously, from identifying a threat to responding from it. And I would summarize that by saying you need to contextualize that threat. And the better you can do that, the more effective your intervention would be. And that contextualization requires a really in-depth, comprehensive understanding of the audience. This is not demographics. This is not kind of picking out with your assumptions and your misperceptions, perhaps, a demographic or community you want to reach. but ideally looking at a society in the round, examining where the vulnerabilities to manipulation and foreign states are, and focusing your efforts there. But that's just the first step, right? I imagine this audience research, these surveys, focus groups, or whatever they are, essentially presenting you with a topography, a map of that society. And on that map, you can see the vulnerabilities and the strengths. You then need to populate that map with an understanding of where the threats are. You know, so we call it threat mapping. There's a million different names for this, but it's essentially identifying the hostile networks, the infrastructure, the messengers, the channels, the outlets, whatever they may be. And if we imagine this map, you can then start populating that with where the threats are, and you can see how they interact with the society that you're operating within, right? That's just the start. You need to then kind of shape that understanding with an examination of the structural vulnerabilities in that society. And by that, I mean policy, regulation. Is there a lack of independent media? Is there a prevalence of media capture by an authoritarian regime, perhaps? And essentially understand, you know, using your map and everything you put on it, you're starting to build a picture of what levers are actually available to you to pull. On top of that, a political economy analysis. Can you get political buy-in? Is there backing for interventions? Are they hostile to your work? Understanding what's realistic in that bounds is obviously a really important step. And then before you start throwing money around and telling people what to do, you really need to make sure that all of that assessment comes together in a grounded local reality. You need to be cognizant of the history, the polarization in that society, culture, and so on. So I'd say, you know, you've identified the threat, but it's essentially meaningless unless you have all the rest of that to put it in, you know, to locate it where it is. Once you've done all of that work, which is no easy feat, then, you know, some basic principles to go back to. Start with your audience. We heard it today on the first panel. But I really believe this, and I think this has proven, you know, the entire marketing industry essentially relies on this principle, right? It's not like an innovation we've made. But start with your audience, meet them where they are, reflect on all of the work you've just done to contextualize the threats, and proceed with that audience and where you want them to get to be more resilient, to contest a certain narrative, to stop, you know, getting news from RT or Sputnik or something. So those are just some starting principles, I'd say. And then just so I don't, I must mention these things. You need strong local partners, right? Like I can sit in London and say anything, but it's meaningless unless I have real, genuine partners on the ground. When you're doing any kind of intervention, especially a kind of behavior change, attitude change, audience focus piece, you need your baselines and your indicators. It might get really boring, but like you need to be able to demonstrate progress, impact, and so on, if nothing else for your clients, but ideally to also learn and iterate from as well. And yeah, just to mention, you know, obviously test your messages. Don't just start pushing stuff out. Make sure your contracts are aligned, the paperwork's in order, and so on. But yeah, I would just, given those honorable mentions, but I'd really go back to that first piece of contextualizing the threat and understanding what levers you can pull in response to it before you kind of start intervening.
Thank you so much for your intervention at the beginning. Maybe just a small follow-up question from me now, and then I'll abstain later from them, and hopefully we'll have from audience. But I don't know if you had a chance to see the part A of our Shift project, like the activities that we really aim to do. So we do a large cross-national survey in 13 countries. We do focus groups, and we also will have an expert interviews of local experts, which are journalists, think tankers, researchers. So would you say that we have a chance to have this map pretty good done, or would you recommend us maybe to include something else?
I mean, yeah, obviously it depends on the quality of the outputs, but yeah, I'd say those are the ingredients to populate this map and kind of show you where you can achieve impact, where the need is essentially, and where we'll work with limited budgets, where to focus your limited resources to achieve the most impact or to address the most strategically vulnerable areas, right? But yeah, no, I think Shift is on point in terms of starting with the audiences and having this kind of robust approach. The cross-border piece is important. I'm lucky enough to work on a project that's operational in 24 countries, and it gives you a perspective that is unique and really helps not only cross-pollination in terms of learnings, but helps you kind of see the flows of information, and you can see some narrative emerge in one country that you saw 2 years ago somewhere else in a different language, and there's obviously opportunities there to learn and to respond more effectively.
Thank you so much. So now I would like to give word to Tom. From the audience first strategy perspective, what changes when we stop asking what do we want to say, but rather we focus on audience, who are we trying to move and what will they actually engage with, from your vast experience?
Thanks, Jana. What changes when we move to an audience first perspective is that we can begin to create content that actually wins their attention. So they will choose to pay attention to a message that has good information, that helps them participate in a democracy. And they'll choose to do it because it has value for them. They see, okay, they can see what's in it for me. They can see it's relevant to their lives, to their worries, their concerns, and their values, and it's interesting. I think that it's quite easy for us in the Brussels bubble to forget that most people actually aren't so interested in politics. They're interested in their own lives, their lawns, their neighbours, getting their next promotion. And so if we want to win their interest, we need to package these good ideas that will enable them to participate in a democracy in a way that seems intensely relevant to their lives. And that's what Audience First strategy enables us to do.
Thank you so much. I don't know if everybody was here in the first panel. That was very engaging, and we could see the different perspective on how to communicate. So in Shift, we also plan to use local influencers. Tom, would you have a reaction to that? Is that something that do you agree with? Unfortunately, I forgot her name, but I already connected with her on LinkedIn. Yes, Anastasia said, yeah.
Do I agree with the idea of using influencers in Shift?
To what extent we'll go with content creators, like small content creators in Shift?
It was my idea. So
yeah. So please.
I agree 100%.
So obviously it would work, but maybe we can share with audience like why we believe that that's a charm. Besides everything that Anastasia promoted.
Because nobody wants to listen to the European Commission. The people who follow the European Commission Instagram accounts are big fans of the European Commission already. And the audiences that are actually vulnerable to disinformation are certainly the ones that are not following those accounts. There's no point in serving fact checks to those audiences who are already well aware of the facts. If we want to be effective in countering disinformation, we need to reach the people who are vulnerable. And the only way we can do that now, especially since TTPA, when we shot ourselves in the foot with that, is to use creators who have audiences who have a direct connection to these vulnerable audiences.
Yes, perfect. So now we explained everybody why. Yes, Given? Yeah, sure.
I would expand the aperture of that as well. Like influencers, we're all like talking about online platforms and stuff today, but that principle of familiar faces, voices to your audience. That could be, a community workshop in a thing. That could be a play in a marginalized community. That could be so many things. Like influencers have great reach and engagement, but just to widen that point, that it can be anyone who resonates with that audience. It could be a priest or anything. You tell me.
You touched upon the discussion that we had yesterday in the kickoff methodology meeting, where we exactly talked about offline influencers in the local communities, and our goal also in part A is to find out who they are, and so now we are in the discussion on how do we identify them, right? Because it would mean someone different for a different audience, but there's definitely huge value in that. And now I'll give word to our colleague Saman, who is more focused on FIMI and interventions regarding that, and he's going to talk about actions or what to do next when it comes to FIMI operations that are already mapped and disrupt. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Basically, I think a lot of us have for a long time been finding these cases of foreign interference, information manipulation, and so on. And there's a lot of knowledge between us about these operations, the actors who conduct them, the methods they use, and the methods that we use to try to stop them. And for a long time now, like since we created the network, the Counter Disinformation Network, we've been working with, for example, CMAS, with Science Feedback, with GlobeSec, on investigations on this topic, and we have managed to actually stop some of these things. So a few months ago, it was like around a year ago, we had the opportunity to start drafting a project to try to actually put all this experience that this community has of analyzing, disrupting, and mitigating influence operations into a new kind of framework and technical system. So we spent the last 8 months looking into how the community has been doing this type of work already, what works, what have we seen work in different contexts, and create what today is called the Disrupt Toolkit. The Disrupt Toolkit is a common approach for how we as defenders can actually, on one side, prepare our investigations, collecting the data that we need to be able to create counter-narratives, let's say, to the audience segmentation and so on, to how do we secure the evidence that we manage to gather on, let's say, the threat actors and their activity, how we can analyze it, for example, detecting coordinated inauthentic behavior and different methodologies around this specific things, how we can assess the analysis that we have done to actually ensure that what we have found is an influence operation, and then move into disruption. How do we destroy their ability to act? How do we remove the websites that they have? How do we get the social media companies to remove their Facebook pages, let's say YouTube channels and so on? How do we have their bank accounts frozen, their card processing companies to drop them, and so on? How can we engage with government? How can we engage with legislation? There's disinformation, well, influence operations, it might not be illegal, but a lot of the things that are being done as part of influence operations is stealing, like impersonating someone or impersonating an like a legal entity, is actually can be a violation of copyright. They're stealing images that someone owns. There is defamation, there is hate speech laws, there's a plenty of different laws that can be utilized to actually stop some of these things if we use them. And lastly, also, which is very important, political and social pressure. We've seen that social media platforms and hosting providers are very, very aware of that there is a cost for not acting and a cost for acting. So if we make the calculation so heavy on the not acting part that they do end up acting, they will act. So that there's to utilize the mechanisms we have, which is press, politicians, public authorities, and so on, or even companies, the private sector getting engaged is another vector that you can utilize. And then how do you mitigate the harm, which is what this project is about? How do you mitigate the harm of these operations, and how can we try to counter them in the long term? This system that we built is very much an open kind of framework which will allow us to aggregate our common knowledge about these topics in the long term. So the results of Shift, for example, we hope to be able to bring into the framework the knowledge, that the experience that we get from collaborating with influencers, to be able to record that and maintain that and build upon that as a community. And to also have a platform, which is our transcript platform, which will allow us to aggregate our knowledge also on the threat actors and their activities, their relationships, and have a platform that will not only allow us to aggregate knowledge, but will guide our actions on how we stop those operations when we find them, which we will be launching more or less now. So yeah, that's Disrupt.
Thank you. Don't put it down, because I have a quick follow-up question. Just from a practical point of view, am I correct to take it that it will be like a toolkit that if I'll have a information operation in a form of, for example, of some form that I would be able to use Disrupt to actually find out or see what I can do with it step by step, or which, So
exactly.
very practical thing that. And it will be, so target audience would be like general public, but also public institutions and researchers, obviously, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It's basically, it has a framework, and which is all the actions all together, and then you have workflows which are specific. Like, let's say you find a sanction circumvention operation or a gender-based disinformation campaign targeting a politician. How do you actually stop that step by step? How do you secure the evidence? How do you do the analysis? How do you do the disruption? How do you do mitigation? So it has the entire kind of chain of action, and who does it, which can then also be nationalized to the national context of, let's say, Romania, which is one of the countries where we have done this already. And we know what government agencies do what, we know what legislations exist, and we also know what civil society organizations can do different types of actions. So we can create a very rapid kill chain, a response chain, let's say, if you don't want to use militaristic terms.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. This has a huge potential, and I think that it will be, especially when the state's reaction on hybrid threats and FIMI is too slow and the processes are not there. In a situation, for example, like last minute deep fake in elections, dropping, and the system not knowing how to react promptly enough to secure democracy and fair elections, then that can be the way to go. And localization, I guess, is a key here, right? Yeah, the local network. So, Kalin, that brings us to Romanian and broad experience, and basically we are turning to you as a practitioner in a field to share your experiences with narratives and the design of
Thank you.
solutions.
I want to start by making a confession. Yeah, I get a large amount of news that I consume from online social media platforms. I know you're not supposed to do this. I know you're supposed to go to the site, to the journalists, and do this, but it's been a habitual thing. But I don't think I'm the only one that does this. So now the news, we're living in an era where the news comes predominantly to us. And the type of news, the texts there are not always editorially, well curated. So there's a very large amount of information that reaches me, in this case, that has not been verified. And because in some cases these niche narratives can become very complex, targeting somebody with leftist views, with very confusing. I almost shared some of these. My colleagues from the fact checking would scold me, but unfortunately I didn't do it. Because I double checked, but not everybody has this energy or inclination or knows about this peril. So we are living in an age where what is supposed to be a common truth, like truth as a common good, something that we can all relate to, is no longer. We are no longer looking at the same thing. I mean, we have the objective truth, and then we have these perceptions of the truth that we are seeing, and these social media bubbles that we are in, and that we are very, very savantly profiled with all these data points that social media platforms have on us, give us this perception of reality that probably the world that I'm seeing is totally different than the world that my neighbor from the second story is seeing. So at some point, this might be our worlds may be conflicting, and this polarization that is happening in the online world is slowly, but unfortunately, tragically, spilling over into our physical world. And then we see protests, we see violence, we see these phenomena that are animated by this social polarization. And I deeply believe, and in the organization I'm working for, Funky Citizens, we deeply believe in truth as really a common good, something that is keeping our societies bound. It's our common projects that we are trying to develop. So I think one of the most challenging things is, and I think this is a question that we should be asking ourselves at each and every methodological step, is: do we really know what is out there? Do we really know what are the narratives, the niche narratives, and these techniques and tropes that are used to hook people and to take advantage of the most when the people are at their most vulnerable times. So with this, in our experience, what we try to do is to create this system that would get the data based on persona accounts. So we made this made up persons based on literature review. We created these accounts that are mimicking human interaction, and of course every account has a story, some leaning left, some leaning right, and then we collect the data that, in this case, TikTok is throwing our way, and what TikTok thinks that we like to consume. And of course, amongst the cat videos, which we enjoy very much, and we are deeply engaged with this, we also get a wide range of disinformation narratives. And in some situations, when we have, if we have a drone crashing in Romania, or if we have a political event, we can see the indicators of viralization, and we can see news stories popping up in our feed. And what we're trying to do is to go upstream and downstream these accounts that we identify that they are disseminating disinformation, and collect the historical posts, and then kind of try to map the network and try to make sense of what is happening within this network. And one of the things that so now this system has been tested as a proof of concept. We're scaling it up, and one of the things we're doing is periodical analysis and looking back at what are the main narratives and which are served to these groups that are have certain systems of values. For instance, like if you keep liking extreme right groups, or if you engage with this content, you're looking for more seconds at right-wing type account, then you will get the recommended system will recommend you similar type of content. So. But there is also spillover between these bubbles. I mean, we are living in isolation from one another up to the moment where something happens, and either there's a paid ad, or there's an artificially inflated account, or maybe just a lot of people from that region that are sharing or engaging or commenting on one, and then it appears in your feed. And you spend a couple of more seconds, and the algorithm, the system records that, and then from that moment on, you will see that kind of content. So I think it's important, like mapping is important, and we should not only do mapping before elections, we should do mapping iteratively on a weekly basis, on a daily basis if possible. We've seen with our fact-checking colleagues, we've seen like every 3 hours when there's a period that is extremely high risk, their narratives are appearing every couple of hours. And if you're checking them, and if you can respond to them, then that's a challenge in itself to try to disseminate this as fast as possible. But sometimes it's not gaining the same traction. So what we're trying to do is to get all these narratives and try to see, to have like a periodical every 3 months, every 6 months, to do this thematic analysis and see, what are the main themes that are being engaged by these actors. At the same time, I think transparency is extremely important for this. Like there is this project, transparency.eu, where we collect data from, we have a partner, and this partner built a scraping system and collecting data from all the public budgets. And then you can go on this, if you live in Romania, you can go on this site, and then you can see what the budget of your village, of your city is, and how they're spending the money. And we have like a civic challenge and a civic challenge program where you can learn more about the civic initiatives in your region and so on. I think in a way, I think this kind of transparency would benefit also to be ported towards this social media outside the left-wing social media bubble, towards these audiences that are bombarded with disinformation, and this to create this sense of ownership, reinstill this sense of ownership to our political project. I think this would be the main challenge, and but things need to be transparent, need to be simple, need to be understandable, and need to be put available to a person that goes to work for 8 hours, you sleep, 5, 6 hours, 8 hours in a very happy case, and then you spend some time with your family, and then you don't have time to check every news, like for multiple sources, or find your local representative in order to understand the intricate democratic processes that are happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, mini follow-up question, and then I'll have questions more to the other speakers. Please prepare yours, because I'll be then talking too much. So, Kalin, two things actually. These 3 hours intervals, does it mean that it's, from your perspective, do you think it's a sign of automation? Does it mean that this information are, like narratives are pumped up into these accounts automatically?
No. The 3 hours. Sorry. The 3 hours interval is a technical flow that. So we have this fact-checking wing called Factual.ro, and they're checking politicians' declarations. So we have whatever they disseminate on Facebook, and this is only Facebook. Whatever they disseminate on Facebook, we send it to them as soon as possible. But because we're working in shifts and we have a working program, and because of our editorial policy, then they get an update every 3 hours, and then if there's something there, they will publish it in order to prioritize.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Sorry for my misunderstanding.
From this point of view, we had the last thing we did was to analyze this data set with the Irish field protests, and then we, starting from a seed list of accounts, we explored, we mapped the network upstream, downstream, and then we did a sliding window on it, and then we've identified coordination events on a 15-minute, 1 hour, and 6 hour windows of accounts that are linked together, and the texts are extremely similar.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also possible, and but this is a more technical discussion.
So what you described is also some kind of like mapping. You do also the mapping. You just do it from a different perspective, right? We will do the survey and research, desk research about it and interviews, but you do actually it by infiltrating the bubbles and seeing what the people, the other people than you, or like in your own bubble are seeing. So for Tom and Elliot, is this kind of map also like? Is this kind of map the same useful? Would it provide complete picture enough for targeted responses, or how does it compare to the Shift's kind of like approach of survey and doing the interviews with researchers and so on?
I don't know how it compares. I don't have a detailed understanding of Kalin's project there, but the more information we can get about our audience, so we can understand what they really care about, what messages they're engaging with right now, what they're worried about, what they hope for their kids, all these kind of things. The more information we can get, the more able we are to route our messaging responses in a way that, in a framing that's intensely relevant to them.
Because basically the goal is to reach them, right? The goal is to reach to the people outside of our bubble. So we map them, we understand who they are, what they are worried about. So what we want to really figure out how to be really efficient with the little money that we have to actually deliver the message that they normally would not see. But,
not only to deliver it to them, but to frame it in a way that encourages them to frame it in a way that means they're going to choose to pay attention to it, so they don't just skim past it instantly, but that hey, damn, this has got something for me. And then if they don't pay attention, they're not going to. It has no impact. But if they pay attention to it and they see these messages repeated again and again with enough frequency, that will impact how they think about politics, how they think about the world.
Would you like to react?
So, if I understood the question, it's about the kind of mapping Callan's
Well,
doing.
there's so I think that the best map is when you have all the data from social media, right? From survey, from everywhere. This will be like the map most complete. But I think that this kind of like complete map takes a lot of resources. I'm just my question was simply, I was curious how different is it to learn what people react and what people respond in a survey, like what that's maybe I'm going into the spiral with it.
So I think there's as you said, as much data you can get on the habits, behaviors, attitudes of your audience is imperative. I think as much insight on those individuals is great, but like I said in my opening bit, you need to pair that with understanding what the adversary is doing as well. We've all got limited resources. If you're going to intervene, you ideally want to break that link between what the adversary is doing and their target audience, right? So, I started this analogy of the map, and I think it snowballed a bit, but, having the topography of a society on a page is really helpful, but it only becomes like a strategically useful asset once that map is populated with what the bad guys are doing. Here's the circle that says this is the really vulnerable bit, guys. You need to focus here. So it's all of this coming together. So it does drain resources, but when you've got to be strategic and when there's risk of every intervention you do getting blowback, essentially getting exposed, another headline about zinc and some Russian outlet or whatever. It's worth bringing all of this together so you can be really precise and really.
One of the follow-up questions that I actually saved for you was when you mentioned that we do 13 countries, you did for 24, and you're still working on them. Is there a challenge that you've experienced with doing this research and activities in such a high number of countries, and maybe something that we can learn from this?
I mean, there's obviously a kind of bandwidth challenge, so with, rolling out multiple segmentations at the same time, very practical operational challenges. But those are solvable, right? Like, what's more interesting, I think, is the opportunities that this perspective offers you, right? And, we've done comparative analyses of our audience research across societies. We can disaggregate that data. Let's remove all of the male samples from the data set and look at female vulnerability to manipulation in a very, defined geographic area, for example. Or you disaggregate it however you want, young people, rural people, educated people. So the more you learn about audiences per se, you've got such an, especially when it's audience behaviors for this sector, right? You've got such rich ground, fertile ground for learning, cross-pollination, like I said earlier. So, there's obvious operational challenges, but beyond that, there's just ample opportunity for learning and optimization and iteration and so on.
Thank you. What you described is also why we are so excited about the project, because the data we will actually get will help us to understand even more than we do now about the situation with narratives and how we can counter them. So now I'm opening the floor to the questions. Before that, maybe I'll just kindly ask so you can introduce yourself. I know we are not so many of us here, but it would help us to understand where we are coming from, and maybe a small, tiny, kind request to you, Rosita. When there will be 5 minutes before, and please show me high five, because I don't have a time keeping here. So we have one question here. No, I pointed to you because I haven't seen anyone else, but please.
Thank you. I think you know me already, so no need to introduce myself. I have the first question for Elliot and Tom. Because I think it's kind of, we need to be, as researchers, as counter-disinformation experts, engage much more with the communication experts than we do now. Can you give us examples from your practice of what success looks like? Maybe from specific interventions or campaigns you have implemented, so that we can start, imagining this more in practical terms. Is this about getting a message out there, reaching audiences and generating traction? Or is this about measuring or achieving social change or behavioral or attitudinal change? Can you even measure that? And do you need to do campaigns on a continuous basis to be able to say, okay, I'm linking this intervention to this specific impact? And second question, that's for the whole panel, and it's a bit more kind of provocative. What prevents us actually? Like, it seems like we have all the knowledge, all the intelligence. There's so much wealth of intelligence of how influence operations work. What is it that prevents us from doing this more at scale and using the same methods as marketing experts and agencies do? Is it money indeed? Is it that we're way too siloed? Is it that we kind of have some, I don't know, moral or legitimacy concerns? I would really appreciate if all of you can comment on that with a few sentences. Thank you.
So let's start from the first question. So that was to Elliot and Tom.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very tricky question. So thank you, Rosita. Yeah, how do you measure impact when you're in this very abstract world of reaching and engaging audiences, changing attitudes, behaviors, perceptions, all of this kind of stuff? Fortunately, we are not the first people to try this. People have been trying to get humans to do things for millennia. So there's a lot of work to draw on. My answer has kind of two pieces. So the first bit is you can measure a campaign. The extent to which you give, your data credence is a question for me, honestly. But yeah, you can deliver a behavior change, or you can test a narrative, whatever it might be. You can look at your reach and engagement metrics. You can roll out some focus groups or panel testing or whatever, and you can create data which says, yes, we had impact. Whether that's real or not, that's a tricky one. And yeah, we've mentioned it a few times that marketing is, all about this kind of stuff. And there's plenty of tools, methodologies, and so on to demonstrate the effectiveness of a campaign or whatever it might be. So I would point to, there's lots of existing methodologies and industries and sectors where you can, measure these things. I remain somewhat skeptical of, trying to quantify this stuff. The second part of my answer is more around, what are we actually trying to do with this? Like, I don't think it's realistic that whatever government or institution or commission is going to pay for it, they're going to be happy to just keep funding campaigns, and just the adversary spends more and we spend more, and suddenly everyone's spending billions on campaigns and no one knows what to think. Like, I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, right? Like, in Moldova last year, we were looking at between 100 and 200 million dollars worth of Russian interference, right? Like, again, I'm skeptical of these numbers, but that's what was being thrown around. In response, I think, the entire European community, the UK, private sector, whatever else, I think it was a couple million, right? Like, and that was a big mobilization to defend Moldovan democracy and all this kind of stuff. So I just don't think we're ever going to be able to compete on their terms. Maybe it was a bit more, but so for me, it's more of a kind of fundamental question. Like, if we're not going to compete at scale in terms of these things, it's going back to what Saman was saying about disrupting the infrastructure, their ability to disseminate these messages in a society. But kind of zooming out a bit from what we're doing, do we really want to contest every narrative, or do we want to reduce, degrade, destroy a malign infrastructure and replace it with a good, productive, sustainable, flourishing ecosystem? You're nodding very, very vigorously, Saman. And that, to me, is more of a solution than just funding endless campaigns from taxpayers' money, essentially. So that, for me, is the tricky bit. How do we measure the growth of this productive ecosystem versus the reduction, the degradation of the malign one? And to do that, we need to start exploring illicit financial flows. We need to start looking at, you know, the kind of stuff you guys are doing when it, you know, the inauthentic behavior, sure, but like, what is it actually achieving? Is it reaching people? You know, all of this kind of stuff. And this, for me, becomes a much more complex question about essentially measuring the balance of good and bad information outlets, you know, the service providers of information in an information environment. That, I would say, is a work in progress. No one's nailed that. There's some really interesting work you can do with LLMs and AI to kind of look at an entire information environment and almost say, hey, 20% of this is good, 30% is bad. Let's move that dial, you know? So that, combined with some other approaches, I think is a really interesting direction to go on. That was a bit of a meandering answer, but I think it hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah, it was a complicated question, so it's okay. Tom, would you like to answer as well?
What does success look like? So we can see what success looks like for us. So we'll take a pro-rights or pro-democracy message, working with an NGO or a media outlet or a public sector body, take the original message and target it at the echo chamber audience, and then target it at a more mainstream audience. And we can see often a very clear difference in the amount of engagement we get between these two audiences. If the difference is big enough that it means that this actually really isn't landing outside the echo chamber, then we'll do a new version or several new versions, and then target them back at the echo chamber and then back at the different mainstream audiences too. And sometimes we get really enormous differences in results. So we can improve engagement by up to 100% sometimes. Then that then translates into up to 500% organic engagement increases month on month with organizations' social media pages. Best one we ever got was just by changing the headline on a video. We went from 10,000 views, 10,000 paid views to I think it was 2.1 million organic views, which was 2,901%. Sorry, 2,000. Whatever it was, it was a big percentage increase. So yeah, we can very clearly see people choose to engage with these really nice, constructive ideas if they're packaged in ways that work for them. And yes, that in response to your question, Rosie, yes, that does lead to long-term impact, and we can see that in the marketing sector. There's very clear relationship between engagement and sales. And we can see it in what our opponents are doing all the time. They're using these same methodologies, same tools, techniques from marketing to sell or to push political ideas, and we can see the impact of that in the polarization that we're experiencing in our societies now.
Okay, now I'm opening for the second part, or if you want to follow.
Another question. Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah. Please, so now let's start from Saman. I mean, he was already mentioned. Shall we? What is needed?
No, I think indeed money. Like truly, I think there's a few issues here. On one side, the funders, the governments, philanthropy, they're throwing money around without seemingly having a clear idea of a larger strategy, and this is very controversial maybe, sorry about that, but there is no common strategy or common direction that they were working towards. If we don't have that, we're spending money and resources on doing 100 different things without having a clear idea of where those things should lead. So first of all, we actually need a strategy for how we're going to defend democracy, how are we going to drain the poison, how are we going to disrupt these hostile operations, and how are we then going to move to actually stitch together the gap, the wound that they have created in our societies. So I think this is kind of what's missing, right? A strategy, the money to actually fulfill said strategy, and then the next step will be to not only, have it, but also then create a community, create like a civil society that is working together towards those objectives. So I think that's what's missing from what I'm seeing, at least.
I'd like to address two challenges that I think are paramount. Maybe, one of them has to do. Maybe it's my obsession with the knowing what's out there, but I think this is really relevant because if we look at history, the movements, like the social movements that changed the world upside down in the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, like the Russian Revolution, the Russian Civil War, what happened in Europe with all these national states that started to, and all these groups that started to gain rights for their people, was animated also by this revolution in information, by the printing press, and by the fact that there were enough people that knew how to read and write that they could read in the public square to the others. And it was this togetherness that these influencers, so to speak, was able to uproot the system, the world system then, and to change it with this new with this new world that we're living in, that starts with human rights, democracy, recognizing one another's rights and living together and so on. And now we're living in a situation where those squares are no longer a public place. Those squares are in our pockets. We don't know really where to get the full picture. So we don't have this full picture, and getting the full picture in the first place is a challenge because we also need to uphold the rights to privacy and so on. So that's one big challenge, and another big challenge has to do, I think, with the money. Yeah, money is always something central because to our societies, because we need to function, and money provides this thing. So right now, technologically, it is way cheaper, is uncomparably cheaper to intoxicate social groups with information than to monitor on the one hand. So having a bot farm is way cheaper than having a Meltwater monthly subscription. And going besides this, even with the micro-influencer ecosystem, there is trends in Romania that, like, for instance, if you want to buy 1,000 followers that will like your post, that's going to cost about like 30, 40 euros, something like this, even cheaper. So there is this market now that is normalizing these kind of practices, and this is evolving as we're speaking, as we're trying to implement stuff, as we're trying to reach a common ground in policy, as we're trying to establish like a common understanding and strategy for this. The world is evolving, and in a direction that's not very nice.
Yes, I echo this issue about the funding because just with an example of our project that we will have a project for 18 months. Hopefully they will come up with scalable solutions that can be used for the future, but without secured funding or without institutionalizing some of the solutions by institutions that can communicate better, for example, with influencers, then the effort will essentially be really high and then probably none. And then on the other side, you have disinformation actors that have lots of resources that are continuous. So I think the pure setup is done in a way that we are unfortunately in a down corner of the play field. Elliot, would you like to continue?
Yeah. And that's a really nice segue to what I wanted to say around the challenges. So thank you. I was going to start with the boring one, which is about the money and it's about the contracts. I'm not sure exactly who is in the room, but if anyone's involved in making policy or programming or funding it, this is the time. it's not just about the volume of money. The US used to chuck a huge amount, hundreds of millions, into doing exactly this type of work in this region. And it didn't, you know, necessarily succeed, I think it's fair to say. So it's also some really mundane things around like aligning contracts and timing, projects to bridge gaps between programs and so on. Essentially, the way everything is done broadly now, it's all very siloed. And okay, we're going to do a 2-year research program to identify a threat. And then there'll be a gap, and then there'll be a call for tenders, and then it's like, okay, we're going to respond to that now, 3 years down the line. And you're suddenly talking in these crazy timelines, and it's like, guys, this is a very dynamic environment. We need to be responding in hours, not years. Genuinely, it's possible to do it in hours if the contract's lined up, essentially. And all of these different pieces are too often siloed. And I think, again, I'm lucky enough to sit across a program where we do the research and understanding, but we then go on and fund interventions, and we can move pretty quickly. Even that could be quicker, but that for me is the fundamental issue amongst all of this. Like you guys have said it already, but there's lots of amazing work here, but it's disconnected, both geographically and temporally. And then building on that, another challenge again with our, the mythical powers that be, compromising on the audience-centric approach, which I think everyone, that's the emphasis of today, really. And allowing some big figure to kind of, they've got an assumption, a belief that this community needs to be targeted with this message or whatever it is. And suddenly you've thrown all your methodology, all your research out the window, and you're kind of doing something because someone wants it out of their personal interest or whatever. And I kind of wish we had the guys on the first panel still here, the MEP and the influencer. That was such an interesting, right, guys? Like, that was such an interesting juxtaposition. And it was striking to me, as far as I'm concerned, if anyone is listening to the EU Commission or watching traditional media, they're probably not vulnerable to FEMI, right? Like, they're probably not the guys we need to worry about. The people who get all their news from Telegram and YouTube and weird echo chambers and stuff, those are the guys we need to be worried about. And no matter how loudly you shout how good the commission is or whatever, like, they're not going to hear it. So sticking true to those principles. And then just final point on this is like, none of the systems we have currently, I don't think anywhere, are really well established for this kind of work, detecting response, dynamic, engaging interventions, and so on. And like I said, we need to be doing this in hours, like, genuinely. So I think there's a long way to go. But I also think we need a little bit of a mindset change. We're still talking about responding. And I would like it to be a quicker timeline, but really, and we've said this, I think, already on the panel multiple times, focusing on prevention. And that prevention is degrading malign infrastructure, as it emerges before it reaches people, right? That's the key to it all. And if you can do that with one hand whilst boosting the productive ecosystem, that's how we do this, right? And until there's kind of contractual alignments and coalitions and coordination that can act like that, we're going to be hitting those bottlenecks every time, rather than putting our full effort behind countering the adversary. So, yeah.
And so we'll take the question, and if there is only one, then that one, and then we'll respond, but also kind of like wrap up. So if you don't want to respond to the question, also maybe say your final thoughts. Go ahead.
My question is a bit technical, and it's for Callan. You talked about creating personas, and these personas were receiving content from TikTok in order to understand what types of disinformation / narratives each were receiving. I want to ask about how did you create these personas, like conceptually and then technically, and then also my understanding, like from like human-centered design, when you want to create personas, is that they're based on assumptions, right? So did you get to also test those assumptions and like kind of change? I'm curious about the process behind creating these personas.
So I suggest that you
It's technical,
do
sorry.
that like in general, and then in the more technical detail, you have it over the coffee.
So we did a literature review of the disinformation that's being disseminated in the Balkans and Central Europe and Eastern Europe, and we found out a system of values that's usually associated with certain social groups with certain views. So this was the assumption was that if we follow this phenomenon that has been observed in other partner countries, then we will hit on the same actors, the same kind of narratives. Based on this system of values, we created these fake accounts, and then we started to manually, and we did not share. So we have a very strict code of ethics with this project. So we are not, we don't want to disseminate this information. We are liking and we are spending, randomized but a certain amount of time with weights on, looking at the screen. And then we collect whatever is coming in. And technically, I can give you more details, but we are using the same software that is used by big companies to test their products on mobile. So mobile testing, automation testing, basically.
Okay, so now thank you for the question and thank you for the response. We will wrap up now with maybe short few sentences if you want to give the last kind of like message about what we have discussed. If you prefer to answer my question that I have now, you can do that. So, for example, when Elliot was talking about interventions and us working as civil society organizations, but also if we are talking about overall democratic resilience, protecting democracy, but also being strong enough not to buy into all disinformation narratives and malign narratives that will be there all the time. We see on our surveys that the response to these narratives differ from country to country. So we have countries that are more resilient and are not buying in, the population is not buying it so much. We have otherwise. So it's definitely the whole society approach. So would maybe the kind of like the way to go is that if we come up with the solutions that work, the communication solutions, marketing solutions that work to promote the democratic values that we have, shouldn't our institutions adopt them instead of us on project basis trying to execute the projects that die after a certain time? So please just in turn give your thoughts. You don't have to react on my comment, but you feel free to do so. Saman, do you want to start?
I think, is this within the mandate and role of civil society to continue doing this type of things? I think the question should rather be, how do we create funding models that will allow us to continue and that we don't work project by project? But my final word is, I think truly, if we work together on this, we actually do stand a chance against these actors, and I invite all of you to join us in developing this new methodology, deploying it, and working together in the long term to stand up against these authoritarian actors. So happy to collaborate.
I think so the audiences are extremely fragmented. We are very niche. There's a lot of niche targeting. And I think this is kind of echoed because we are a multicultural society. We are very different from one another, but we are also together in this project. But also with the funding, this also creates cleavages, and this also creates, fragmentation. And I very much agree with Saman, and I think we need a common approach, and we need more togetherness, and we need a more monolithic approach to this, to at least to kind of make up for the fragmentation, that we have in our societies, and the polarization that comes with it.
Yeah, again, whole of society approach. This is a big topic. We could spend all day on it, but I think it's absolutely fundamental to achieving this. I essentially see it, there's three levers, three territories where we can have impact. One is with the audiences themselves, either by communicating with them or by supporting an ecosystem which will communicate and service them long into the future. Go for the second one. The second pillar is about the malign networks. This stuff I was talking about, rebalancing an information environment, degrading their stuff, replacing it with good stuff, in layman's terms. And the third one is the structural vulnerabilities, right? Policy, regulation, legislation, whatever it might be. There's no institution, there's no CSO, there's no one who can do all of this at once, you know? So ergo, there has to be a whole of society response to be effective, is paramount. And I think the kind of key question going forward is, you know, who's kind of convening everyone, who's coordinating this? And I would just point to Moldova as the most recent and probably the most salient example of this, where, yeah, state institutions were very active. They were going together with CSOs to the tech platforms to force them into action, to take down accounts. They obviously banned RT, Sputnik and so on, which they gave them a very strong legislative and kind of policy footing for CSOs and fact checkers and independent media to then go and get content taken down, to get content demonetized and so on. And all of this is in a backdrop where across institutions, CSOs and the international community, the EU delegation and everyone, a concerted effort to proactively communicate with citizens to prevent a void, a vacuum, an information vacuum, and disinformation, like in biology and physics, it abhors a vacuum. It will fill it. It will just get drawn into it. So you prevent that vacuum with the institute and everything else, and you do all that together, and, you know, ideally you're in a situation where you can pull those levers at the optimal moments for greatest impact, and then you can do it. And how we have Moldova, case in point, the adversary was all over it, and yet the election was, you know, I think representative of Moldovan society, you know? So yeah, it's paramount. It has to be a whole of society approach. We could fund independent media for 1,000 years, and that would be a great thing, but it's not going to counter disinformation, you know, not alone.
I'd like to say something about Moldova.
We would have to take it to the, because
No,
we will have
just
another.
1 minute.
Okay.
I just want to say that in Moldova, this success was, of course, a societal success, but it also was spearheaded by this investigation that 2 female journalists had that infiltrated the Kremlin dissemination network twice. And then they mapped it. And then they collaborated with the authorities and with other partners in order to take it down physically, because it was also physical and online. So it was like this.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to ZDG and Rise Moldova for all of the work they did. It was incredible. Yeah, it's Zordegada. ZDG. Sorry, it's a bit the English version. Zordegada. Just a final word from me is, yeah, happy to chat with everyone. Really open to coordination, collaboration. I know a lot of people here already. If you don't, come and chat. But yeah, really excited for this event, and congrats to everyone here and CST for organizing.
Thanks. Yeah, to respond to the part of the question about should institutions be doing this themselves, yes, absolutely. And it's a real shame the state of institutional communication is in right now. So if we look at the overall objective of disinformation, it's to destroy trust in institutional brands. And so arguably, the best way to counter the disinformation is to build trust in institutional brands. The stronger the belief, the stronger our belief in the brands, the harder it is to tear that down. And I think Brexit, as Elliot mentioned earlier, is a case in point. So within the United Kingdom, there was no understanding of what the European Union was doing for British citizens. There was no brand Europe in the minds of British citizens. And so when all this disinformation was hitting them about all these lies about what Europe was doing, there was no shield, like no cognitive shield for them. So if better institutional branding had happened for the European Union in the UK, then I'm very sure that Brexit wouldn't have happened. So yeah, and thanks very much, Jana.
Thank you so much. A huge thanks to our panelists. Thank you, CSD, for organizing, and happy to chat.